Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How everybody is well, best of health, best of state. As we enter into our next episode 7 for the pursuit for meaning. So we're exploring pretty interesting stuff. I would think. If you've been following up from the first session, um, and then follow up to second, third, and fourth, you will see that we've been diving into pretty interesting, pretty intense stuff. I would say, she's not really intense. So she's pretty basic actually. But maybe for the modern person of our age, it's pretty intense. But anyway. So we were discussing about science, and then we were discussing about philosophy, and how all of this stuff is actually pretty incapable of answering very important questions that we face in our life, which is why are we here, what we are doing, and where we are going, and the reason for our existence, and the purpose of our lives. And the reason of how this is very important is, one, we also discuss about the importance of morality. That if a person knows and have a what kind of perspective they have on life will determine the kind of morality that they have, the kind of reasons of their existence they will have. And also, another thing that is very important that we never really highlight, when you have a purpose in your life, a lot of things make sense. Like the reason of suffering, the reason, the question of that the usual concept of why people say, if there's such a thing as God, why is there evil? When you understand there's purpose and there is a reason of why things happen, and this makes sense. I'll make for example, like you go to the gym, you know, and then you exercise, you go through like that pain, you could perceive it as pain, you could perceive it as difficulty, you could perceive it as evil in that sense, if you get what I'm trying to say. But the outcome is that you get stronger. The outcome is that you get more stronger, you become more determined, you become more courageous. And so in what happens is, any perceived notion of what is could be harmful, bad, and so on and so forth could be understood now as not evil, not bad. And the reason for it is, most of the time, why we perceive things as evil and wrong and stuff like that is because we do not know the motive of it. And so when you have a true concept of understanding of your place and purpose of this world, things make sense much easier. But if you don't have a purpose, that's where people lead into suicide. People lead into things which they cannot make sense. And sometimes what they do is, when they cannot make sense of their current existence or where they are at because of whatever they know and stuff like that, they end up taking drugs, into alcoholism, into Prozac, the drugs of the streets and the drugs of the market of the pharmacy. But both of it does the same thing. Both of it, it just mends you down. It just keeps you not thinking about the actual fact. And that's modern medicine anyway. That's modern medicine. They solve the symptoms, but never the cause. So anyway, while we were discussing all that, we were going through all these key details, key important stuff, and then we entered to the last part where I mentioned that we were going to enter into religion, discuss things about religion. But I want to go one step before that. I want to discuss something also important, and the reason for this is thinking. What is thinking? And I want to attempt to make a claim. The claim is this: that the way we have been thinking, the methodology of thinking that we have, is wrong. Or I wouldn't say wrong. We have been not thinking. We have not been taught to think about the way we are thinking, and we accept the way we are thinking for a matter of fact. That how we think cannot be wrong. How we think is right. Why we've been taught, the way we've been taught to think is the way thinking should be. And this is something which I think is important to discuss, because if we understand the concept or the idea that we now can question the way we think, it opens much more doors. And once we understand that our thinking can be rectified, or a thinking of a person is something that is not perfect, and it can be altered and repaired in that sense, or it can be added on to give different frames of thinking, different methodologies of thinking, and which will expand the thinking capacity, then you would more likely be able to understand more things. And that's why I just wanna, before we enter into religion and all that kind of stuff, I feel that if we don't have the capacity to think otherwise, or think in different ways of thinking, this understanding religion, understanding these things which we're about to discuss in the future, will not be possible, because the methodology of how we are looking at things prohibits us from looking at it correctly. So I wanna share something which I find very beneficial, and it really revolutionize the way I look at things, and it really put in perspective of another possibility of thinking. And there is not only one way of looking at the world, or there's not one way of right thinking. There is other ways of thinking, and it's very important for us to understand this. For example, let me give an example. I think I mentioned this before, but like a pen, like this marker. One way of thinking and looking at things will be like this. We look at one way and we'll see the pen in this marker in this sense. But other ways of thinking, what it will do is it will be able to manipulate the marker, emulate the marker, change its angle a little bit, and look at it around for angle. And then some can even open it up, and then some ways of thinking can even cut it open without even opening it up. The other way of thinking will say you need to use it to understand its function. So I guess this is what is important for us to reflect on. That if we think things in one way and we accept that there's only one way of thinking, we will not see it for what it is. And what happens if you look at it, if you understand everything in just this one dimension, what happens is we limit ourselves from the capacity to look things in many possibilities. And that is a big problem. And especially for us who is living in such a time that we don't have time, that we need to make sure that we get it right. Because we only have one life. We only have one opportunity to put things right. And we got to make this one opportunity that we have right. And one thing which will help us understand where we're at and where we are going and how, and the reason of our entire existence is having a right frame of mind, a right way of thinking, which will allow us to see things not in one dimension, but to be able to see in different aspects, different opportunities for us to look at in different ways, so that we can understand the thing for what it really is. And how does it apply in our life? There's one way of looking at it. You'll see, we are just atoms. But if you look in a different perspective, you'll see it from a different angle. And this is why it's important. So I wanna talk about one more. So based on that, I wanna enter into this next thing. This little booklet here, called, I'm not sure we can see it, but it's called Heidegger for Muslims. Hopefully you can. But anyway, I don't think you can see it. This little booklet here. I'll share with you guys the text and stuff like that in the description. Basically, it's a booklet by one of my teachers, Sheikh Umar Ibn Verdiyo, where he speaks about Heidegger. And who is Heidegger? Heidegger was a German philosopher. He was one of the people who has revolutionized thinking, or he has, I think, in the Western world, questioned thinking in a way that philosophy couldn't recover. He basically, as in the words for Sheikh Omar, he closed shop to philosophy. And why is it important for us to understand, to look at Heidegger? Is that as Muslims, is one thing is that Heidegger cannot teach us about Islam. But what is interesting, there's nothing he can teach us about Islam, But what he can give us, is to understand what kufr is, or what this Western way of thinking is. And because he understands it, he is able to break it down in a way that we can never understand. And what Heidegger did was he basically broke it down for us. And then we as Muslims can appreciate it in a different way that no one else can understand or appreciate, actually. So I wanna start off with that, to just discuss this, and to share with you some things from this booklet. I will put the booklet up into I will put the description of the book and link to it in my description, which you guys can have a look. And yeah, so we just do a short one, and then we'll carry on with this a few more times, and then we'll look at another text after that. So here we go. As a start, introduction. As a start, I have taken two famous essays of Heidegger, what is called Thinking and The Essence of Truth, and combined them to produce a first approximation to Heidegger's thinking. We'll revisit these essays later as we progress. The idea on a gentle entry into his thinking is recommended to get used to his fundamental ideas. Nevertheless, I am going to go a little bit faster than him for the sake of abbreviation and by taking advantage, when appropriate, of our understanding of knowledge of Sufism. The path towards thinking. Heidegger describes the coming to realization of his thinking as a path of opening followed by a leap. This final leap will set you into a position with regards to your understanding of the world. What comes before is the preparation for the leap. Heidegger wrote, by the way of series of lectures, we are attempting to learn thinking. The way is long. We dare only take a few steps. If all goes well, they will take us to the foothills of thought, but they will take us to a place which we must explore to reach the point where only the leap will help further. The leap alone takes us into the neighborhood where thinking resides. The leap will take us abruptly to where everything is different, so different that it strikes us as strange. Very interesting. It's as though, we were mentioning earlier about the pen, right? About this marker, sorry. But if we look at the world in just this one way, it makes sense. We've been accustomed to looking at the marker this way. But what Heidegger, or what Sheikh Omar is basically Heidegger for Muslims trying to do, is he's saying, let's take you the steps to realize there is more than just this, right? Just this one angle. And then the only way for you to understand this is that you need to leap. A leap. And the leap, he will explain it later on, but it's very interesting. But when you take this leap, what you will realize is that this marker is actually not just this. And it will turn. There's multiple possibilities of how this should be looked at. And it will uncover, and you will look at the whole universe, the whole world in a different way. And allow you to look at things in a way that you never imagined before, which is very important. Let's continue. The shocking news. Heidegger sets his thinking apart from the scientific inquiry or philosophical inquiry. He in fact prepares us for the shocking news that we are about to encounter, which is that science does not think. Obviously, the type of thinking that he is referring to is not the thinking to which we are accustomed. The way of thinking that we are accustomed to from school and university is the thinking of science. He is saying that the type of thinking that we are used to is blind to a fundamental matter, a matter that escapes us because of the way we inquire. And that to which our thinking is blind is the true element of thinking, truth. The true element of thinking is truth, yet scientific thinking, which takes its roots in philosophy, is blind to truth. It can only inquire about the essence of truth, but not truth. And what is the essence of truth in philosophy? Is the result of inquiring through what, where, how. This is what Heidegger calls essential thinking, essentialism, which is completely different than thinking. Heidegger says science does not think. It has only to do with thinking. This fashion of thinking, as he calls it, is only useful in as much as you are aware of the gulf that there is between thinking and to do with thinking. Where we are saying is that the way of thinking of science is a limited one, due not to the restriction imposed by every field of thinking, but based on the way it thinks. It does not matter what. The way of thinking is useful if you understand its limitations. But if you give this fashion of thinking absolute validity, it turns into superstition. Then, instead of being useful, it becomes a danger. This is like looking at the world through red-filtered lens. This is useful to understand different intensities of red in nature, but you cannot conclude as a result of your research that the world is red. This is science. This is scientism, which equals superstition. In conclusion, we need to understand that there's a gulf, an unbridgeable gap between thinking and science. I think this is a very interesting point. Maybe we can stop here on our next video. This way of thinking, which we have been discussing now, what Sheikh Umar has been discussing, has a very similar tone to what we were discussing earlier. That the scientific methodology, the philosophical methodology, is incapable of answering it all. Why? It's because of its methodology. It only gives you shades, it gives you one-dimensional way of thinking. And that is not truth. Truth is not understood if you look in one way. Truth is not real. The whole truth is not discoverable if you look in one perspective. And what we have been given to the truth of the matter is, you can't discover the truth of the matter in just one way of looking at it. You need to look at it in different facades, different perspectives, different angles for you to understand what it really is. If you look at things in one way of thinking, someone can argue with you in one way and you will make sense. But when you look at the crux of the matter, you realize that life cannot be looked at in one way of thinking, which is why we are discussing this. That life is more than what meets the eye. Life is more than what the school has taught us. Life is more than what the universities have taught us. Life is more than what the economic elite has told us. Capitalism has taught us. And so when you uncover that life is more than just one way of looking at the world, it gives you a perspective that you never realize. And that this is what basically Heidegger and what our previous discussion book, Maulana Fadul Mansari, was sharing, that if you look in the way of science, if you look into the way of philosophy, and now through Heidegger, saying that what we've inherited, the way of thinking that we've been taught to from school, from the day we were born, through our kindergarten, schools, and primary schools, secondary school, and university, has been given us the opportunity to look at the world in one way only. This is the only way you should look at. And hence, what it has created is this gigantic group of people who believe in crazy things, because the only ability for them to understand things was one way of thinking. And what our quest is as a human being in this world is to break free, because it's a slavery. If you think about it, slavery is in the fact that you've been forced upon in your mind one way of thinking and you cannot come out of it. And to break free from this enslaved mentality, enslaved forced upon mentality, you have to understand things for what it is. And only when you break away from the slavery of your surrounding, be it whatever your race is, your religious background is, you are Muslim, not Muslim, you must have the capacity to break free from the societal imprints, take what is good, and understand its limitations, and then realize there is more than what it is. I'm not saying whatever you have is a problem. I'm saying that you need to ask yourself, what is this that you have? Where do you get it from? And if you question yourself, put your ideas, challenge your ideas, challenge your perspective, challenge the beliefs that you think is truth, and put it to the test, and willing to be wrong in your quest for truth, then you will discover truth. But most of us don't do it. Most of us don't do it. So in understanding this important aspect, understand the importance of questioning the way we think, that's where we will be able to discover truth for what it is. So until the next session, we'll go on a little bit more into the Heidegger for Muslims. Until the next sessions, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you everybody for watching The Pursuit for Meaning. And if you enjoyed and appreciated what we have put out here, it will help us a lot for you guys to like, share, and subscribe. And also, if you want to join our little community we are building, the links to the Discord is in the description below. Thank you. Bye.